They dragged her out of the wagon as she kept on resisting, trying to kick them away from her with curled-up knees, squirming, screaming, and writhing in protest. "Bastards!" She growled through the mucky cloth, still stuffed in her mouth, and kept slamming her body into them as hard as she could. "Kaluchastra!" She heard the one say in a tone that betrayed an announcement, and suddenly a blow of sickening laughter and screeches emanated in the background. Her heart stalled, realizing there were more. And then they halted. Then they groped her from the hair with a harsh fist and yanked her face around. "Morma! Morma!" She went, deathly pale. A throng of deformities stood in rags, overalls, and elite dresses, surrounded by a large, sweltering campfire before the dark, open mouth of a cavern, staring right back at her. She almost fainted when her eyes set upon the wooden spear roasting a human head and body over the ember, eyes swollen white and dilated, almost popping out of the skull. Her breath shuddered, but there was movement again. Hands that gripped her tightly from the arms, pushing her forward into the crowd that now roared in celebration. "Ah!" She slammed her eyes shut when they tossed her into a cradle of soot-covered bodies and felt greedy fingers clutch at her shirt front, tear it apart, and grip at her corset like a pack of coyotes devouring their kill. Needles of teeth hooked into her clothes and nails tugged at them, ripping one layer after another off of her body. A hand groped at the cloth in her mouth and pulled it out, but she could not utter a single word. She trembled, now rigid in a state of defense she could no longer control. Tears frosted upon her cheeks in a wind's rise, and eyes snapped back open when she felt forward movement again, and a voice. "You know them rules?" One snarled, one that appeared a lot more coherent than the rest. She glanced over her shoulder as the inbred lot jittered in anticipation, grunting in self-restraint. "First, the torture," the man said, taking a long whiff of her bareness at the crease of her neck, dragging a crooked, jaundiced fingernail across it that plowed through her skin. She winced, but stood as brave as she could. "Then," he lowered, continuing to smell of her breasts like an animal seeking the scent of an estrus, attracted to its pheromones. She looked away, crying quietly, inclined to spit at his face, yet petrified she would find herself speared if she did. "Then," he giggled ominously, but the rest followed, salivating at the sight of her flesh. "We will cleanse the body with the fiddler's seed," he said, and a crippling terror enwreathed her. "Then we let Morma starve," another bellowed from the crowd, leaping up and down in a thrill that ripped right through her. "Yes, Morma will starve, and then we hack Morma's head off and put it on a stick." They spilled into laughter and groped Charlotte again, dragging her into their lair. She flailed helplessly against them, still void of a voice, and stared in panic at the surroundings of human heads impaled onto wooden spears, serving as ornaments, flanking their path deeper into the cavern with a steady flame of torch that burned through their torn-up mouths. They cut through the fishing line but left the rope around her limbs and tossed her excitedly into a cage that seemed part of a sheriff's old wagon, with blood-stained lattice of iron and a floor filled with locks of old hair. They locked shut the door of the carriage, and her breath instantly caught in her ribs, and her face fell at the scent of death that washed over her. The fiddler brood celebrated around her, feasting on human flesh, drinking mugs of a yellow liquid, tossing bones towards her as if paying her for her revealing bareness. They sang in their own language, in a high-pitched voice almost demonic, so otherworldly it felt to be scratching at her ears. Drumming discarded bones against the cavern walls, they danced around the cage, hand in hand, leaped from their toes like the heaviest of swamp toads lunging from rock to rock, shaking the ground beneath them. "Lord, you have abandoned me," she cried silently, dispirited, squeezing her hands together against her face, and sheltered her eyes from their faces pressed against the iron as they squeezed their slobbery lips and rotten tongues through it, letting out a bestial yelp that sliced right through her. Hours went by, hours of celebratory screams and menacing glares, hours of her body writhing in panic, and her hands clutching each other in mental support. There were prayers, so many prayers that spurted out of her mouth in sheer hopelessness, and yet there was no answer within the iron walls she was confined. The gang had settled down for the night, huddled close to one another, snoring and coughing out substances as they choked in their sleep. Another disfigured man was watching her from the corner, set to guard the cage, as if Charlotte could ever escape from it.